Okay, and welcome back. I hope everybody had a good weekend. We're going to pick up today where we left off Friday with the three branches of government. Talking today to start out with about Congress, the legislative branch. Hopefully you remember a little bit of what we started Friday. The Congress of the United States is a bicameral legislature, which means it's a two-house legislature of the federal government of the United States, consisting of two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Congress meets in the Capitol in Washington, D.C., and both representatives and senators are chosen through direct election through vacancies in the Senate. Could we turn our phones off, please? And through vacancies in the Senate may be filled by gubernatorial appointment. Interestingly, in the past, the senators were appointed by the governor, and I think it was I don't remember exactly which amendment it was, that where we started electing senators directly. Anyways, members are affiliated to the Republican Party or the Democratic Party normally, and only rarely to a third party or as independents. Congress has a total of 535 voting members, 435 representatives, and 100 senators. The members of the House of Representatives serve two-year terms representing the people of a specific district in the state. Congressional districts are apportioned to states by population using the United States Census results, provided that each state has at least one congressperson. Each state, regardless of population, has exactly 2 senators. At present, there are 100 representing the 50 states. Each senator serves a 6-year term as opposed to a 2-year term for a representative, with terms staggered so that every 2 years, approximately 1/3 of the Senate is up for election. Article 1, which basically created the legislature and gives it its power, of the Constitution states that all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. The House and Senate are equal partners in the legislative process. Legislation cannot be enacted without the consent of both chambers. However, the Constitution grants each chamber some unique powers. The Senate ratifies treaties with foreign powers and approves presidential appointments, while the House initiates revenue-raising bills. The House initiates impeachment cases, while the Senate decides impeachment cases. A 2/3 vote of the Senate is required before an impeached person can be forcibly removed from office. Government powerlessness led to the Convention of 1787, which proposed a revised constitution with a 2-chamber or bicameral Congress. Smaller states argued for equal representation for each state. The 2-chamber structure has functioned well in state governments. A compromise plan was adopted with representatives chosen by population, which benefited the larger states, and exactly 2 senators chosen by state governments, benefiting the smaller states. The ratified Constitution creates a federal structure with 2 overlapping power centers, so that each citizen as an individual is subjected to both the power of state government and the national government. To protect against abuses of power, which we talked about extensively on Friday, each branch of government, executive, legislative, and judicial, has a separate sphere of authority and could check other branches according to the principle of the separation of powers. Furthermore, there were checks and balances within the legislature since there were 2 separate chambers. The new government became active in 1789. So what does Congress do, you might ask? Well, Congress has the authority over financial and budgetary policy through the enumerated power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. Enumerated powers means they're specifically laid out in the Constitution, as this is what the Congress is responsible for. The 16th Amendment in 1913 extended congressional power of taxation to include income taxes. The Constitution also grants Congress the exclusive power to appropriate funds, and the power of the purse is one of Congress's primary checks on the executive branch. Congress can borrow money on credit for the United States, regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the states, and coin money. Generally, both the Senate and the House have equal legislative authority, although only the House may originate revenue and appropriation bills. The Founding Fathers wanted the power for taxation to be in the legislative branch, which was elected by the people. So that's why the House has that power. Congress has an important role in national defense, including the exclusive power to declare war, to raise and maintain the armed forces, and to make rules for the military. Congress can establish post offices and post roads, issue patents and copyrights, fix standards and weights and measures, establish courts inferior to the Supreme Court, and make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or office thereof. Article 4 gives Congress the power to admit new states into the Union. One of Congress's foremost non-legislative functions is the power to investigate and oversee the executive branch. You might remember Steve talking about the checks and balances. This is part of that system. Congress also has implied powers which aren't specifically laid out in the Constitution. Deriving from the Constitution's necessary and proper clause, which we talked about above there, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all the other powers vested in the Constitution and the government of the United States or any department or officer thereof. So how's the law made, you might ask? Congress is split into two chambers, the House and Senate, and manages the task of writing national legislation by dividing work into separate committees, which specialize in different areas. Some members of Congress are elected by their peers to be officers of these committees. Further, Congress has ancillary organizations such as the Government Accountability Office and the Library of Congress to help provide it with information, and members of Congress have staff and offices to assist them as well. In addition, a vast industry of lobbyists helps members write legislation on behalf of diverse corporate and labor interests. Ideas from legislation can come from members, lobbyists, state legislatures, constituents, legislative council, or executive agencies. Anyone can write a bill, but only members of Congress may introduce bills. Most bills are not written by congressional members, but originate from the executive branch, as Steve talked about. Interest groups often draft bills as well. The usual next step is for the proposal to be passed to a committee for review. Each bill goes through several stages in each house, including consideration by the committee and advice from the Government Accountability Office. Most legislation is considered by standing committees which have jurisdiction over particular subjects, such as agriculture or appropriations. A bill may go to what's called a markup session, where committee members debate the bill's merits and offer amendments or revisions. Committees may also amend the bill, but the full House holds the power to accept or reject committee amendments. After debate, the committee votes whether it wishes to report the measure to the full House. If a bill is tabled, then it is rejected. If amendments are extensive, sometimes a new bill with amendments built in will be submitted as a so-called clean bill with a new number. Both houses have procedures under which committees can be bypassed or overruled, but they're rarely used. Generally, members who have been in Congress longer have greater seniority and therefore greater power in the committees. Once a bill is approved by one house, you have to send it over to the other house to get approved. Basically, it goes through more or less the same process in the other house. It goes to committee, gets debated. If they don't make any changes to the law, then they vote on it, and if it gets passed, after passage by both houses, a bill is enrolled and sent to the President for approval. The President may sign it, making it into law, or veto it, perhaps returning it to Congress with his objections. A vetoed bill can still become law if each House of Congress votes to override the veto with a 2/3 majority, and that leads back to the power check theme. Finally, the President may do nothing, neither signing nor vetoing the bill, and then the bill becomes law automatically after 10 days, not counting Sundays, according to the Constitution. The supporting agencies for Congress, as I mentioned, are the Library of Congress, Congressional Research Service, Congressional Budget Office, Government Accountability Office, Government Printing Office, and the Copyright Office. They all do various tasks assisting in Congress's day-to-day activities. And those are the sources. Next up, we're going to have Sarah talking about the judicial branch. So I hope you all learn something.
Good morning, everyone. As Steve said, I hope you all had a good weekend. Right now, I'm going to go over the judicial branch. So that's the final branch in our little unit. Like the other two instructors have done, here's a pre-test that I want you guys to kind of think about as we're going through. So what is the judicial branch? Who is in charge? Does the judicial branch make the laws, execute the laws, or determine whether or not a law is constitutional? Also, who makes up the judicial branch, and what powers does this branch have? So just some questions to consider, and we're going to answer those at the end of the lesson. So basically, simplified, the judicial branch is the branch that decides whether or not a law is constitutional. There are 9 justices who are appointed for life. They may choose to resign or die, and then they would bring in a new justice. This picture here is the United States Supreme Court building. All right, so I have a short video for us to watch. It kind of goes over all of the branches, but just pay attention mostly to when they go over the judicial branch. Oops, just kidding.
It's the legislative branch.
Yeah, it's the courts.
It's the executive branch. I'm the one that passed the laws. So if you want to make something happen, you gotta go through me.
Who's calling the shots in the Oval Office?
Vocabulary. Let's go. It goes check, check, 2 state balance, not just one. We bring 3 talents to powers. Gotta keep them separated. That's the motto. We made it. 3 branches of government, that's all. Legislative writes the laws. Executive executes laws so official. The court system is judicial. I'm the legislative branch. I write laws. Without me, it'll be anarchy, of course. Say my name. I'm called Congress, sitting on Capitol Hill. Kid, that's honest. Made up from the Senate and the House of Reps. We write a bill and send it to the president's desk. We legislate, and we roll deep. 535 members in my clique. See, Senate, each state sends 100 senators in all. That's how we do. The House of Representatives is by population. County reps the hardest, no debating. If my bill gets a presidential veto, I can override that with enough veto. I wrote the budget and I'm passing the laws. Now I'ma grab the mic and pass it off.
Oh, hey, Congress, sometimes I need to mess with your plans. I carry out laws, I'm the executive branch. I'm the president, roll with the VP and cabinet. I'll veto your laws if I'm not having it. So hail to the commander-in-chief. All the armed forces need to follow me. My power's been blossoming since George Washington stepped into the office and did awesome things. I got a bowling alley in my home where I call in airstrikes from invisible drones. Along with the cabinet and judges too. The boss in the Oval Office, that's who.
Check, check, I'ma keep it short, the judicial system. I'm the courts, my highest court, that's supreme. All 9 justices know what I mean. Nominated by the press, confirmed by the Senate. No term limits, they serve a life sentence. Plead your case, it's not unusual for me to rule the law
So
unconstitutional.
I write a law, well I might veto it. And I can override that, you know it.
Man, I'm executive, the one that carries it
You
out.
can get challenged in the courts, that's what I'm all about. I might declare it unconstitutional.
I can impeach judges who act unusual.
I nominate justices in the first
I can
place.
impeach you too if you step out of place. 3 branches of government, that's all. Legislative writes the laws. Executive executes laws so official. The court system is judicial. 3 branches of government, that's all. Legislative writes the laws. Executive executes laws so official. The court system is judicial. It goes check, check, 2 state balance, not just one. We bring 3 talents to powers. Gotta keep them separated. That's the motto. We made it.
Okay, so I hope you all enjoyed that little vignette of loveliness. So now I'm just going to run over the types of courts. Here I have listed all the types of courts. I'm just going to go over a couple of these. So the first up is the Court of Appeals. There are 12 regional courts and 1 federal court of appeals. Each court has the right to review decisions of district courts in its region. The district court is the court right underneath the Court of Appeals. A convicted criminal may want to appeal his or her case. To appeal in the court system means to apply a higher court for a reversal of the decision of a lower court. So the appellant, or one who is appealing a case, must show that in the trial court there was a legal error. So they can't come and say, oh, I just think that's really unfair and I want to redo. Like, there has to actually be a legal issue with their trial in the first place. So no new evidence may be permitted, and a document called a brief is written by each side stating their case. Then the briefs are given to a panel of 3 judges who review the case. So like I said, 1 step below the Court of Appeals is the district court. There are 94 districts, and each has at least 2 judges. Each district has a U.S. bankruptcy court. In the district courts are trial courts of the federal system. A grand jury indicts the accused and juries decide the case. So it's kind of like a bigger version of what we think of, a courtroom setting. The U.S. Court of Federal Claims, otherwise known as the People's Court, deals with grievances against the federal government. And then we get down to the state courts. There's special versus general jurisdiction. The special jurisdiction handles juvenile and lesser criminal and traffic-related cases, whereas the general handles serious civil and criminal cases. A civil case, by the way, is one that usually involves money, just money, and a criminal case is where there's actually like a conviction happening and someone's going to go to prison, and they probably will also have to pay a lot of money. So this is kind of what I talked about laid out. The Supreme Court is obviously the biggest court in the land. Then here's the Court of Appeals with the 12 circuits, 94 districts, the tax courts. So you can kind of see there how that's all laid out. Here is an example of a summons for juror service. Hopefully, since you guys are pretty young yet, you won't have to do this for a long time, but maybe your parents or grandparents have served on a jury, so this is what that would look like. Here I have listed the justices on the Supreme Court currently. As you can see, John G. Roberts right here is the Chief Justice since 2005. So there's that. Give me a second, just look over the names. As you can see, some of them have been on for quite a while. 1986 is getting to be a long time ago now. Here are the canons, or otherwise a code of conduct, sort of, for the justices to follow. So I know it's kind of blurry. So Canon 1, a judge should uphold the integrity and independence of the judiciary. Canon or Rule 2, a judge should avoid impropriety and the appearance of impropriety in all activities. So they can't, go to a party and get completely wasted and come to work the next day and, do their thing. Canon 3, a judge should perform the duties of the office impartially and diligently. So they need to be fair in what they do. Canon number 4, a judge may engage in extrajudicial activities to improve the law, the legal system, and the administration of justice. So kind of like how you guys are involved in extracurricular activities, that's kind of what they're doing to improve the country. Canon 5, a judge should regulate extrajudicial activities to minimize the risk of conflict with the judicial duties. So that's kind of like if you guys are in, 7 different things plus school, it can kind of get a little hectic. So try to pick and choose what you want to do extracurricularly. That's what the judges try to do. Canon 6, a judge should regularly file reports of compensation received for law-related and extrajudicial activities. So if they get paid for it, they need to say, got paid for it, not trying to get paid under the table or anything. Last canon, a judge should refrain from political activity. So a justice can't say, oh, hey guys, want to go, picket this political whatever, they can't get too political one way or the other because of canon number 3. Remember it said should be fair, so those are those. This is our current Supreme Court. They have jurisdiction over civil issues and federal criminal cases. They cannot approach an issue or a case on its own. It must be brought to them. Justices can be impeached if they are not following the canons that I just explained. Also, a fun little fact, between 1789 and 1869, the appropriate number of justices has changed 6 times. They kind of settled on the number 9 in 1869. So, they've had 9 justices for kind of a while, but there was some fluctuation there. All right, here are some important cases I want you to know. 1803, Marbury versus Madison. It was basically the first time that a court decided that an act of Congress was void because it was unconstitutional, which is exactly what their job is to do. Another extremely important case is Brown versus the Board of Education. In 1896, there was a case called Plessy versus Ferguson, which basically allowed for state-sanctioned segregation. So if you've heard the term separate but equal, that's kind of where that comes in. We all know it was separate but not equal. So the Supreme Court handed down the decision that segregation was unconstitutional on May 17th, 1954. So there's that. This is, I know it's kind of blurry to see, but she's holding up a newspaper that says, I think it's High Court bans segregation in public schools. So that's a pretty iconic photo. And then the headline here, segregation declared unconstitutional. Here's another picture of the Supreme Court building. This is a tool that judges commonly use, gavel. This is another visual organizer for you guys. Just to kind of, it's a real basic, simple explanation of how it's broken down. But if you notice that at the bottom, they both say interpret laws, which is exactly what they should be doing. In your handout, this picture is in here. I thought it would be a good visual organizer for you guys. It goes over all of the checks and balances down here. Judicial branch, like I said, Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, and the district courts. So the court can declare presidential acts unconstitutional, and then it, it kind of just goes around the little triangle there. Okay, so conclusion or post-test. If you guys remember at the beginning, I said to keep those questions in mind. So what is the judicial branch? Who's in charge? What's the function of this branch? Who makes up the judicial branch? What is the power of the judicial branch? So who wants to go? How about Steve? What is the judicial branch? And don't be afraid, you guys. I know I went over it kind of quick, but you guys are smart, so I know you guys can.
The judicial branch, looking at my notes, the biggest thing I'd say is the courts.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Okay.
Who is in charge?
The Supreme
Supreme.
Court.
Thank you. Matt, what would you say the function of this branch is?
To determine whether legislation is constitutional or not?
Exactly. Who makes up the judicial branch?
Would it be all the courts in the land?
All the courts in the land, the 9 justices, all the judges involved. So yes, pretty much every aspect of that. And what is the power of the judicial branch? We kind of covered it in the third question there. So this one's for anyone. Okay, go ahead.
To determine the constitutionality of laws passed by Congress.
Awesome, awesome. All right, and then here are my references that I used. So, and this will be available for anyone who wants to maybe go on here and, there's a glossary of legal terms, which I know seems pretty dry, but whoever's interested in that can go on there. There's understanding federal courts, welcome to jury duty if you were interested in that. So there you go. Any questions from anybody?